The ruined manor loomed in the moonlight, its crumbling walls swallowed by ivy and shadow. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth, and a hush had fallen over the land, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Then came the wail. It rose from the darkness like the wind through a hollow reed, a keening cry so mournful that it sent a shiver through the adventurer's bones. It was not the shriek of a vengeful spirit, nor the warning of an enemy unseen. It was sorrow, raw and ancient, carrying a message as old as time. Elena, the cleric, clenched her pendant. "A banshee," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. The others scanned the shadows, searching for a ghostly woman of legend, but she did not appear. There was no malice in her call, no spectral figure reaching for their souls. The wail had come and gone, and in its place was silence. Doran exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Nothing attacked us," he muttered. "Maybe it was just the wind." But Elena did not answer. Her hands trembled and a cold dread settled in her gut. The stories were clear. The banshee's wail did not herald danger. It foretold death. And before the night was over, someone among them would die. Welcome. Today's video is on the Banshee. First, let's go over what the Monster Manual tells you. So, what does the Monster Manual tell you? Not much, as I've come to find out reading the 5 ebooks. But anyway, the Monster Manual tells of an incorporeal undead known as the Banshee. The Banshee are said to be brought back to undeath by a quote-unquote torment, which compels them to haunt the living. The book gives a d6 table to roll on, to use, or for inspiration. It's on screen now. Banshee are said to herald doom and are motivated by unresolved misery or sorrow. It's said that any species can return as a banshee, but the elves in particular have folklore and tales of how their kind can return as a banshee. Such elven folktales warn of those who hoard or destroy beauty in all forms are returned as a banshee. Next is on about the stats. So, Banshee are chaotic, evil-aligned, incorporeal undead. The CR4 monster has an AC of 12, HP of 54. Banshee's stats are generally middling, but the standouts are strength at 1, not +1, just 1, and charisma at 17. The Banshee possesses the usual resistances incorporeal undead have against non-magical bludgeoning, slashing, piercing, but also acid, fire, lightning, and thunder. Banshee also possess the usual immunity to necrotic and poison as other incorporeal undead, but also have cold immunity and immunity to the restrained condition. The Banshee possesses the common language as well as aiding to the Elvish folklore. Interestingly, they know Elvish by default. Moving on to traits, so the Banshee possesses a unique feature called Detect Life, wherein they know the location of any living creature that is an undead or a construct within 1 mile. The Banshee has incorporeal movement, similar to other incorporeal undead. In combat, the Banshee has a nice multi-attack for being such a low CR. Its one multi-attack action gives 2 corrupting touches and 1 use of its quote-unquote horrify feature per action. The corrupting touch deals D8 plus 3 necrotic, which isn't great, but it does get 2 of them. The horrify is a DC 13 wisdom save, giving the frightened condition on a fail. The marquee feature of the Banshee is its wail, which has been toned down for this edition. In 30-foot radius centered on itself, it's a relatively easy DC 13 con save, dealing 3d6 to each creature who failed if their HP is 25 or above, and it drops those 25 HP or lower to 0. In the 2014 rules, the Banshee's wail was called Keening Wail and not Deathly Wail, and it had a range of 60 feet. The mechanic was different, wherein you took 6d6 damage on a success, and you're dropped to 0 on a failure, regardless of your HP. In addition, the save was a DC 15 save, not the 13 of the new rules. The now Horrify is indifferent to the older Horrifying Visage, wherein each non-undead creature, which could see it, in this case no restriction on constructs, made a DC 15 wisdom save or was threatened. The Detect Life, or quote-unquote life sense as it used to be known, has been reduced in radius from 5 miles to 1 mile. The melee attack also used Force, a DC 13 dex save, or give the prone condition, a feature lacking on the current rules, so the melee attack knocked them prone. quite brutal. Next, what the monster manual does not tell you. So, in previous editions, the Banshee was said to be formed exclusively from the souls of women, most commonly elven women, but not exclusively. Banshees in previous editions used to possess features of knowing the languages they knew in life, unlike the 5e's version of Common or Elvish and the 2014 rules of being Common, Elvish, or Sylvan. In regards to appearance, Banshees are not a monolith, and they're reflections of their previous form. In time, these reflections become more and more distorted until they barely resemble their original form, though they are always still humanoid. In the southeast of Faerun, there was a variant of the Banshee called the Fairy Hags, which were closer to the Celtic myths that inspired the monster. They were seen as a force of nature, which sought to prevent the destruction of wilderness. They looked different, having blue skin and no legs, causing them to appear at halfling height over ground or water. These fairy hags were featured in the Blood and Magic game, and they possessed a trait like vampires in which they would not enter buildings, even if they were in ruin. It's not clear if they could not or would not enter these buildings. The Banshee in D&D takes its roots in Irish mythology, in the quote-unquote Fairy of the Mound, pronounced in Old Irish as Banshee. It is said that female spirits, which herald the death of a family member by screaming, they get their name from the quote-unquote mounds, or sheed, which are found throughout the Irish countryside. Banshees were traditionally presented as having long, streaming hair, which they're often seen combing. Some legends specify that the Banshee can only wail while combing her hair. The Banshees were said to wear grey cloaks over green dresses, and their eyes were said to be red from continual weeping. When several Banshees appeared at once, it was said to indicate the death of someone great or holy. So let's wrap this up. In conclusion, this is a good attempt at making a lower CR monster, but I feel like the old school save or die mechanic is what set this monster apart and made it special. Additionally, the removal of the monster being female specific is fine, just not true to mythology it stemmed from. I feel like if you want to make a Banshee, its wail should be its defining feature. It's the kind of thing that makes memories. It's the kind of thing that makes D&D D&D. Sometimes your character dies. I can see the need to avoid a level 20 party being dropped by a single monster with a few bad die rolls, but them's the breaks if you want to have a game decided by die rolls. Is the monster better in a game design perspective? Sure. But is it going to make memories? The narrated intro was my take on the Banshee not being a save or die creature while trying to remain true to Irish mythology. If you want to be true to the mythological origins, have the monster foreshadow death, or play the classic trope of an undead asking for its bones to be interred to lay it to rest, there's many directions you could take it if the save or die mechanic is too much. But ultimately, you're not designing a monster from the ground up. This isn't a creature designed for the game out of whole cloth like the Beholder. You can rely on the source material. When people want a Banshee, they want a whale. Make the monster higher CR if you have to, and give it restrictions like power word kill, where if the target has a certain number of hit points or less, it drops to 0, but otherwise it takes damage. This iteration is as in the 2024 version, is my least favorite monster design over what is otherwise one of my favorite monsters. Unfortunately, I'm going to give this a 6 out of 20.